Evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Village of Lake Zurich Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for Wednesday, February 21st at 7 p.m. It is now 7:03, so we will get underway. So, Sarosh, if you would please call the roll.
Commissioner Castillo,
Present.
Commissioner Giannini is on his way. Commissioner Glowaz,
Present.
Commissioner Marks,
Present.
Commissioner Morrison is asked to be excused this evening. Commissioner Muir,
Present.
Commissioner Schultz has also been asked to be excused this evening, and Chairman Stratman.
Here. So let the record reflect that we do have a quorum this evening for our meeting, and the next item will be the consideration of minutes in the Finance Commission from our last meeting, which was January 17th, 2024. If anyone have any comments or changes? Okay, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the January 17th, 2024 PZC minutes as submitted.
So moved.
Thank you, Antonio.
Second.
Thank you, John. Call the roll, please.
Yes.
Sarosh.
Commissioner Castillo,
Sure. Yes.
Commissioner Glowaz,
Aye.
Commissioner Marks,
Aye.
Commissioner Muir,
Abstain.
Chairman Stratman.
Aye.
All right.
So let the record reflect the minutes have been approved as submitted to us this evening with no changes. The next thing we move to on our agenda is item 3, which is a public meeting. And the first item is going to be considered as the unpublic meeting. This section of the agenda is an update on the comprehensive plan project. Tesca Associates, the consultant working on updating the Lake Zurich comprehensive plan, will present the findings of the community poll and other engagement activities completed as part of the effort to update the village's comprehensive plan. The role of the PZC is to serve as a steering committee throughout the process, culminating in a recommendation to the village board to adopt the final comprehensive plan document. Sarosh would like to introduce our consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, we have Ms. Erin Sigliano and Ms. Francesca Lawrence here to make their presentation on their findings and summary of the community poll and other engagement activities that they've conducted thus far. Go ahead, Erin.
Yes, thank you. My name is Erin Sigliano, principal with Tesca Associates and project manager. Francesca Lawrence is co-project manager. We have been steeping in community engagement since last we met. It's been a while. We met back in October, and at that point we were running through a depth of data, the community conditions analysis. And what's really cool about what we're going to share tonight is connecting the dots in terms of what that data shined light on, what community engagement we've done since. A lot of that has happened, and Francie's going to bring us on that journey. And we're at a point where we're seeing some very clear themes arriving from the consensus on a multitude of fronts. So we expect the presentation to take about 25 minutes. We encourage Q&A organically throughout. We have some questions at the end that will invite your insight and guidance and checkpoint on. And all of this data, and then some, is going to be posted to the project website tomorrow. So you can, all of those tuning in online, residents, they can really dive into it. And we're hopeful that more community feedback comes through the online tools here following, if we missed anything. So, with that.
If I may, before you start,
Yes.
could you go over for me the goals and objectives or the expectation of what this was supposed to reveal, so that as you go through it, I know exactly whether it has been done or not done, because I'm not real clear on the objective. I have something in my mind. I just want to hear from you. What was the expectation of putting out the survey? What did you expect to hear? And that way, as you go through the presentation, I can basically put checks where they are.
Sure.
Thank you.
Happy to set those expectations. So coming into the comprehensive plan as a whole, I think the main goal was to connect with the community and not arrive at what the answers were, but to have informed engagement. Lake Zurich is working from a place of strengths, and I think that the focus here is understanding what clear strengths those are and how those inform the opportunities of the comprehensive plan. The questions of this, which we'll get into in our presentation, were very carefully structured such that they built from existing community engagement to date. You had a national community survey. We're very aware of outreach fatigue. We want to understand what the community is sharing independent of this process. And so what we hope comes out of the check marks is all of the different ways and the breadth of voices that are coming to the table and what those priorities are. I don't venture to say going into this that we knew with 100% certainty what the absolute goals and objectives would be of this plan. I'm not the community expert. I do planning and engagement, and I really lean into the data and feedback from the community to help guide that. What Francie's going to cover is the themes of feedback from the community workshop that took place in October, our pop-up, which we reported on our last visit, and I hope that you're able, those themes and consensus, without leading the witness of what those are now, are very clear, and that you see it's very reflective of a very representative breakdown of the demographics. Does that answer your question?
Can I have one there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'll pop in to say, sorry. We're presenting mostly engagement themes right now. The next step for us, because we haven't written those goals and objectives that you referred to, we haven't done that stage yet. This is all the kind of doing our due diligence before that. And then all these engagement findings that we've heard, we then pair with our planning expertise and best practices and the rest of our team. We're just 2 people. We have a whole team behind us. We all then take that engagement and pair it with informed data and planning best practices and transportation and expertise and all those things to then draft the goals and objectives. Does that help?
Not really, but I'll let you go.
Can
Because
I-
again, for me, I'm sorry, Sarosh. So for me, it was more about hearing, this is where the village is today. This is what people, where they want to see the village going 10 years from now, 20 years from now. I get the demographics that are there. I took the survey myself. I saw everything that's in here, and I see there's a lot of great data. I want to make sure that in my understanding, from a perspective of being steering committee and being in the planning phase, is that things are realistic. There's some things in here that are not realistic. There are some things that are realistic. It also tells us pretty much what a consensus or a census would tell us about our diversity and things of that nature. So for me, it's more of hearing what I just said. Where was the village? Where is the village? And where's the village got to go in order to make it what people want it to be? So that's kind of where my expectation would be. There's a lot of data in here that I'm going to listen to you all and go from there. But for me, that's what I would expect from a planning standpoint to say, hey, this is what we want in the downtown. I read that, and I'm going to hear that from you as well. So here's what we want in the downtown. Here's what we want off of Rand. Here's what we want. I love that comment that's in there about having additional housing, for people who work in Lake Zurich and things of that nature. I get all that. That's what I wanted to hear, as opposed to what I can read myself. That's what as my expectation is to hear from you saying, okay, now that you're going to cross those T's and dot those I's, and that's where the expectation should have been from where the villagers or the people who took the survey is coming from. Okay, when I hear something you say, okay, that's good, that's realistic, that's not. So that's where I'm at. Thank you. Sarosh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. What I was going to say is that in a very broad perspective, this comprehensive plan effort is broken down into 2 major sections. The first section is information gathering, and we are at almost the end or the close of the information gathering session. So we don't have any inferences or decisions or guidance at this point. All they're reporting on is what have we found? What is the community
Right.
saying to us?
Right.
And then the next step, which they will actually be talking about towards the end of their presentation, will be setting the goals and objectives of where the plan is, of how the plan is going to be written and what it is then going to tell the village. So
And that's
yet to come.
that's
what I was
perfect,
gonna say.
because see,
Yeah.
for me, and I love where you went with the questions, so what,
Yeah.
in my head, from a marketing standpoint,
Mhm.
which is what I do, It's why that question?
Yep.
What was expected to come out of that question?
Okay, all
So
right,
that,
and
so
that
that's
you'll
the
talk about.
information
Yeah.
that we got, and I get it, that's the data. So then, in my head, I have that, so I can steer myself into the way of where you're gonna lead us.
No,
I think
thank
the
you,
presentation
Commissioner.
will say that.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah, and there's going to be some hard understanding of what that reality is, absolutely, and we need to get into that. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Francesca to run us through the backstory of how we landed here.
Aaron?
Thank you.
So, Aaron provided you an overview of this. Oh, here's the clicker, sorry. Bring up to speed on kind of the status of the project right now and talk about the community input that we've heard to date before we dive into the more in-depth results from that community poll, which Aaron will do. And then we'll talk about next steps. Where do we go from here with all of this good information? And how do we kind of draft the plan from here? And then we'll ask you all to talk instead of us and answer some questions for us. So here's a project timeline. We kicked this off in July with focus groups and interviews. We had the pop-up at the farmers market back in September, where that was kind of like our public launch of the project to the community, and we got a lot of good ideas there, which I'll go over in a bit. And we presented some of that too the last time we were here, which was the Steering Committee Planning and Zoning Commission check-in back at the end of September or October. And then we had our community workshop and officially launched the poll. And then following that, we had a student focus group, which I'm excited to share a bit about as well. Then we closed the poll, analyzed, baked in those results for a while to come up with the summary that we'll be presenting tonight. And here we are at almost exactly the midway point of the project for the steering committee check-in again to share where we're at so far. You can see that falls in the vision and goal setting phase. So that's exactly what we're doing following tonight's meeting. We're gonna start creating that vision and drafting the goals, which becomes the framework for the plan. And then following that, we'll get into the focus areas and priorities, drafting the plan, finalizing the plan with continued engagement throughout. So I know some of you were able to join us for that community workshop back in October, but for those of you who weren't, and if anyone hasn't had a chance to review the summary that we have posted on the website, we thought we'd just go over some of the key themes we heard. So first of all, it was a really great turnout. It was hosted at the library, and we're really thankful to have had their space to use. It was perfect for what we wanted. We had families and kids to older adults. It was a really lively evening, I would say. So we had a few different interactive stations. One of them is pictured here, which was, we called it, I think, prioritization of placemaking concepts. So you can see this was really visual. We actually had 5 boards here. And I'll just go over some of the key themes, not only from this station, but we also had a free-form kind of idea muraling station. And then we had a transportation-focused station where Ryan, our transportation sub-consultant, was there and answering questions about specific mobility issues on a map of Lake Zurich. So here you can see some of the key themes that emerged from the station and the others. We're talking about Main Street as a destination. We'll get into this more. The idea here is you're going to hear a lot of the same things repeated over and over again. So people talked about really wanting Main Street to become more of a destination, having community spaces and things to do for kids and teens in particular, having seasonal all-weather activities, embracing public art and kind of enhancing the community's character, culture, and Lake Zurich's identity, beautification and streetscape improvements. That's a lot of what you see in this middle teal band of pictures with festoon lighting and pedestrian shared streets and outdoor spaces to sit and gather. Celebrating and utilizing the lake, we heard a lot about. Trees and green spaces, local sustainability efforts, and walkability, bikeability, connectivity, and safety for people getting around Lake Zurich. So these, again, this is all posted online in a complete summary, and you can zoom in to see what these photos look like and analyze more of these results. But we heard really great input at the community workshop. This is a big picture summary of a lot of those themes, but you can get into more detail on the website. So following that, at that workshop, we also launched the poll that night. So we had a lot of people who sat down and took the poll right then and there, and then it remained open over the next several weeks. So we wanted to build on kind of that momentum and talk to the students. So thank you to District 95 for working with us and Dr. Walsh, who helped us set up this focus group. This was really great. You can see our smiling faces here. We met with, these students range from freshmen to seniors, I believe, and their insights were really fascinating. I encourage you to go read the summary on the website if you haven't already. They talked a lot about celebrating culture and diversity. You can see it's a diverse group. They wanted to embrace that aspect of Lake Zurich. They talked about walkable activities and shops, strengthening, they thought from a marketing perspective as well, strengthening the lake brand that you have here. And kind of, I think one of them dubbed it Mix on Main, like having a better mix of uses on Main Street. They, the youth is leading, our future in terms of sustainability and the focus on those efforts. So they talked about that, composting, solar panels on buildings, all that kind of thing. And then obviously being that a lot of them don't have a car or can't drive, they talked about reducing car dependency and increasing those connections and circulation around Lake Zurich. And then lastly, we had our farmers market pop-up. This is in reverse chronological order. So this was a great event. We saw many of you there as well. Thank you. And again, these themes are just reiterated. We heard this from the start about having a more connected community in terms of walkability, bikeability, accessibility for people. That means from strollers to wheelchairs, right? Having sidewalks that work for all types of users. Activities and social infrastructure. This is when people talked about having like more programming and things to do. Like this was where we heard the comment on salsa dancing, and ice cream shops where people gather and having events near the lake and things like that. Diversity of things to do for all ages, again, focusing on kids and teens in particular, but we also heard about adults wanting things, again, like the salsa dancing. We heard about community design being important. So people would talk about this building works really well in our community, this building doesn't work as well. We notice when you feel more welcome along one street versus another. So the design of buildings and streets and the public places and built form matters. And everyone recognized that you're really blessed to have awesome nature and green spaces in Lake Zurich, and that everyone wants to preserve and maintain and enhance those spaces. So with that, I'm gonna pass it back to Erin to dive even deeper into the community poll findings, but we hope you'll see the parallels between the input we've heard to date and what we just heard in the poll. Thanks. Thanks, Francie.
All right, let's dive into it. So in terms of getting the word out, as Francie mentioned, all of the efforts building up to this were marketing. And the dedicated marketing, we went through benchmarks. I think almost every other week we were posting out different things via benchmarks, social media, Facebook posts, print marketing, postcards, and figuring out different ways that we could connect with a broad range of community members in Lake Zurich. Towards the wintertime months, the State of the Village came out. I had done a sit down with the mayor. It was really great to have that leveled up as part of the annual report. And we're kind of tracking input along the way. Francie and I were going to do a student workshop, and we thought that this was really the opportune time to do it because of the opportunity to really build marketing into this and hear from the families and youth and broaden that participation. So that was really effective. I think we had a really big spike by 100 or so responses after we did that dedicated marketing and the focus group that came from students, parents, and there was a trickle effect thereafter. We had a total of 368 responses. It was open for 9 weeks. We kept it open through the December and holiday marks to peak more responses in the times that people are home and maybe had more time. And the survey itself was structured, thank you to everyone who did take it, into 3 core sections. I'm very mindful that no one likes to take an all black and white word survey. It's just not inviting. Visuals bring people into the process. We wanted to make sure that it was educational as well and informative. So in terms of the top level elements, I'm going to start by reporting back the themes and then dive deeper into how these came to be. To start, the greater diversity and density of destinations. we obviously don't have full control over the market, correct? So how do we build up that mix on Main is a key question on here. What does that look like? How can we incentivize different things? But looking at that day to evening traffic, not just on weekends, is really important. Thinking specifically about visible arts came up. So how can we make the arts, culture, and seasonal activities something that invites you in with your eye, right? Where are they taking place? These are already taking place. We're building on a depth of events as part of this. Safe, walkable, and inviting streets, sidewalks, trail connections, how those also connect to key destinations, and then maintaining existing housing and exploring new options based on life stages and different lifestyles. And I'm going to hit on that in more detail in just a bit. In terms of the demographics, we do measure this and look at it. It's important to us to know that we're connecting with all ages, backgrounds, affiliations. And so here you're able to see that 89% of participants were residents, 20% they're about attend school, so this can be a student or someone who has a child in school. 16% work in Lake Zurich, 11% visit, and 2% are business owners. Again, we're building from a lot of outreach. We connected with a lot of business owners at the start of this with focus groups and dedicated interviews. Looking at this snapshot here, this made me so happy. When we're looking at who is taking a survey, one, this isn't always the case. You don't always get the broad range of input and tenure of people who have lived in Lake Zurich for different amounts of time. This is really empowering to see that we're hearing from new residents, longtime residents, residents who have lived here for a decade and are raising kids as well as empty nesters. It was very wonderful to see the depth of languages spoken other than English at home. In terms of the note on connecting the dots in terms of this feedback and what does this look like going forward with goals and objectives, this is important. This is a human plan. This needs to reflect human elements of reflecting the community, supporting it, and understanding how do policies and goals and objectives and action items level these components up. The age bracket is notable as well. This is representative of the village demographics that we had hit on at our last meeting in terms of the community conditions. And then, not to dwell on development best practices of poll questioning, but it's a balance of qualitative, quantitative. We don't want things to be subjective. We want things to be additive, measurable, but also open-ended questions so we can get to the root of different things. Important to note as well, this really took into account the scientific survey, which was just done. We did a thorough review of that with staff. We looked at the questions, we looked at the responses to understand how can this poll be additive based on the input to date. So this is a quick snapshot of some of the educational materials built into the poll itself. And just a quick component of the different methodology, measures, and efforts to date. We started with open-ended responses. Thinking big picture, we wanted to know what were the key words that people loved most about Lake Zurich. No surprises here, right? Sense of community, lake, schools, safety, family-oriented, parks, 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 access parks, connected parks. This came up in the student focus groups, this come up everywhere. In terms of the people, the vibe, the connection between neighbors, those are things a poll can't measure in terms of a multiple choice question. So these are the types of questions where we want to really lean into the quotes and keywords. On the flip side, we asked about, think 5 to 10 years into the future. What does that look like? The keywords here too, the bigger the circle, the more times they're reiterated. The element of more came up a lot. And let's break that down. That is building on strengths. So more restaurants, more entertainment. I loved the quote, entertainment and nightlife come to life in Lake Zurich. These are the visions of how people want to interact, experience, spend their money, and stay in Lake Zurich. They don't want to lose the small town charm though, right? So as a community grows, it's just as important to understand what we don't want to change, and that retaining of the quaint small town character while focusing in on key areas of TLC with streetscape, activations, economic development, infill, came to the front lines. Our first part of the poll dove deeper into the places, spaces, and community design. Again, reiterating the places to dine and variety of shops. The accessibility component came up a lot in open response comments tagged into those, and places for middle school as well as high school age students to gather. That came up at our last meeting here as well. We then pivoted it to focus specifically on Main Street. Main Street has been a star of this outreach process and presents a lot of opportunity in terms of next steps. So 80% noting broad mix of shops and restaurants, 54% noting upper stories and rooftop dining. How do we control that? Well, we don't. So that's going to be an important part of next steps too. There's a balance of public and private. You can put guidelines into place that help frame the type of development, the look, the architecture, site design, connectivity, and the component of time. And that's why comprehensive plans are put into place to help frame that over time. We asked about the arts and culture in Lake Zurich and what folks would want to see. 1 out of every 2 noted busking. It's a fun word. Outdoor concerts, outdoor types of performances, guidelines, policies can be put into place to invite this. There's business partnerships that can happen. We're very cognizant of how to balance the public and private implementation phase of the comprehensive plan to recognize what's within our abilities and what we would need partnerships to help move forward on. Educational workshops, classes, that's something with business partnerships. This is as much good information for the village as it is communities and businesses to have an understanding of what people at large want and where they can spend money and the economic development side of aspects. What type of housing in Lake Zurich should be prioritized? This graph here, you can clearly see that there's not a top choice. There are multiple priorities here. 52% noting that maintenance of existing housing stock and the importance on the balance of variety of housing types for all life stages. Those are right next to each other. If you look down at the end, we have similarly 1 out of every 3 both noted starter homes for young couples alongside quality downsizing options. And what those options look like range, right? There's 55 plus communities, there's different types of, do you want to rent? Do you want to reduce the amount of maintenance that you have to do? These are different housing stocks and different lifestyles, and this is reflective of that broad range of input. Continuity of current character is extremely important. You're a built-out community. There's a few opportunities in which things will be focused, and then as time happens, you want to make sure that things are developed or redeveloped in a way that's reflective of the type of character and site design that would really amplify the space. Connectivity and mobility, the top 3 components being the sidewalk connectivity. We spent a lot of time at the workshop talking this over with residents and participants. This isn't an easy solution to solve. This is where our partners at Epstein, who are focusing specifically on the transportation, bikeability, connectivity piece, we're going to really lean into their knowledge to figure out what is the abilities to make sure that this comes full circle. Local and regional trail network, as well as walk, bike, roll in terms of safety, illumination, signals, were all top priorities. Moving into what folks are not comfortable, what conditions they do not want to bicycle in. Generally speaking, people want to be protected from traffic. That's a human thing. How much right-of-way we have to work with affects what we can do in that space. So the balance of what this looks like going forward to the topic of goals and objectives and what comes forward with implementation. This is going to be some math and opportunities in figuring out where things connect and where they make sense too. It's also important to understand what nodes people want to get to. We can't get necessarily everywhere given environment, but folks want to get to parks, they want to get to the main street. This also channels into economic development and healthy communities, the ease with which people can get around. And I liked here, we provided other responses. So what other destinations would you like to walk, roll, and bike to? Bars, that's safe. The lake, local businesses, and just around the neighborhood came up. I just want to bike for pleasure. Makes perfect sense. For question 11, we provided the opportunity for folks to rate their level of support for these different types of elements that are kind of straightforward as well as creative ways to enhance mobility and accessibility. We had heard a lot about pedestrian streets, curbless streets, looking at the streetscape design as an opportunity to really hone in energy to the market, the economic development piece. So far and away, improving the aesthetic and function of different streets, and then street closures for events and festivals, temporarily closing those down to increase pedestrian activity and shopping. The shuttle network is important to touch on. This has come up throughout all of the different engagement opportunities we've had. People are aware that there's, how can this happen in terms of there's not going to be a train station in town, but we want to be able to get places safely and to metro stations and whatnot. This is another piece we will be looking at and how that can come to fruition. And then the last section hit home on environment and sustainability. Quality drinking water, which is already moving forward here, preservation of natural open space, and protecting and stabilizing the great assets you have, the lake, enhancing that tree canopy. 76% of all polled were definitely in support of the village having an active role in helping to support these initiatives. What that looks like and how we can further strengthen that is a question. But you're seeing here this component of sustainability as a whole being very important. So, I talked a lot. What is next? Following today's session, we're going to be reporting back to the community. We don't expect everyone to be tuning in, although I'd like them to. We're going to be pushing this out. We're going to be really encouraging folks to share their ideas and reactions to this as part of the website. We need to get into and past the visioning stage into the meat and potatoes. How does this come together? That is the question. That's why we have a depth of team members, including ourselves, to really get down in the weeds and figure out what the implementation strategies look like. From there, we're going to draft those up. We want to check in with the board on some of the focus areas and priorities. There's different geographies. I'd be curious to know your thoughts on the different geographies in the community that you think are prime and should be looked at in terms of that opportunity beyond the Main Street area. And we're going to draft a plan, have a community open house. We'll be checking in along the way. That's why we're here. We don't want to come to you with all of the answers at once. And that's where I stop talking. So we have questions. I can start with one of, did anything surprise you tonight? Or do you want to bring some questions to me, to us? Anything about the information that really resonated with you?
Well, Erin, let me start with the one thing you said in terms of, I think, the benefit of what you've done with the information you've gathered is you point out the idea that we know what people are looking for, but a lot of that involves actions by others. We don't control what developers do. But we can, in the sense that if we present to the developers what people are looking for, they're looking for rooftop dining. If we would be able to show developers the percentage of people that responded to your survey and said this is what they're looking for, you've now told people who have the money, that if they want to invest their money, there is a market for their business because people are looking for it. They're saying they want it. So you're providing answers to people from outside the community that might want to come in to make that investment. So I think that that's an important tool right in and of itself.
100%. Developers, architects, you want to set those expectations ahead of time. That's time and money on their part to come before, and so this lays that out. This is absolutely a tool, too, for funding. Comprehensive plans, congratulations on the OSLAD grant. These are tools through which grants are more easily awarded.
So I just want to piggyback on what Orlando had to say. For me, what we're going through today is nothing new to me. We went through this 10 years ago. For those of us who were here in Lake Zurich, a whole plan was put into play with renditions and all sorts of things about how to redevelop downtown. Now, I don't need to get into why. Well, the one reason that it didn't happen, we got a new mayor, and they wanted to keep the quaintness of Lake Zurich where it was. Something that you said in your presentation, we still want to do that. That was a big detriment to where this plan was. Why it eventually didn't go was a financial thing. It was a whole different thing. The new person got in as mayor, squashed the whole thing, and everybody that was excited about restaurants on Main Street, and this is before the bypass, because the bypass was supposed to go behind where Twigs was at, the empty lot. I forget the name of the lot right now. But the whole plan was there. I mean, it was a beautiful development from the lake all the way up. So from my side, we've been through something like this that gets us excited about the things that you have talked about that people want to see here. That all said, I'm excited about the fact that this has been brought up again. One of the things that we kept hearing back then and up till now is from developers, have the people be here and we will come in and build. We're not going to build and then they will come. This has been the common theme that we have heard all the way along. And with that in mind, to what Orlando just said, this is something that is not in our control. This is something where we can market Lake Zurich. We can say how wonderful Lake Zurich is. And if we're going to do that, that's something that for me the expectation was, okay, does the village go ahead and come up with, within this comprehensive plan, to put a marketing team together to get out there to the expos, which Sarosh, you've attended many of those, to promote Lake Zurich for what it is and what it can do for this community. Because of what I just said, one of the things that struck me when I look at your numbers is the number of businesses, or in essence, the Lake Zurich Chamber of Commerce that you have, I believe, noted at 2% that went in on this survey. Those are the people that we need to have their monies to be brought in to the village, because they're the ones that are going to have the money, the capital, to go ahead and start to build this infrastructure so that more people will come. For us to go out and say to Wildfire, come on into Lake Zurich, put it on the lake. The other thing that I saw is one of the best things that we have is good and it's bad. It's the lake, Lake Zurich. It's a fabulous diamond. The problem is we don't own it. It's private. Okay, so we have just a small section of the lake. So when people say, well, we should do this and that with the lake, we don't control the lake. We patrol the lake, but we have the smallest portion of ownership of the lake. So that's a big try to get people who live on the lake to come in that direction. The numbers that you had with the youth being the high number, where we've had a lot of pushback, is on the people that didn't answer this survey, which are the older people that have been here in Lake Zurich forever. That's where it kind of really had this big pushback 10 years ago. So from that standpoint, I'm also looking at, all right, we've got this new blood that's here throughout all of Lake Zurich, because it's not just the lake. The problem that I see at times is Lake Zurich is so wide that we're talking about really Main Street and what's in there, as opposed to everybody that lives on the periphery. I personally live at the southernmost part of Lake Zurich. For me, when I say, okay, I'm gonna go to the Y at Foglia, it's like, oh man, because it's on the other side of town. Literally, I gotta cross it all. I love the fact, and we've always had discussions about sidewalks, and I don't mean to gobble up the time, but we've talked about sidewalks a lot. And from staff, we know it's a hard sell to get people to get us what we want, to have the ability to have sidewalks so people can walk everywhere. And then our streets tend to be narrow. Not only that, but because we've attracted businesses, our parking lots, as an example, our parking lots tend to be in parking spaces a little narrower so that we can get a lot more cars in there, which makes it a pretty tough way to travel. So our streets are kind of the same. And one of the things that we had an issue with 10 years ago was, okay, we're gonna bring everybody, we're gonna build, everybody's gonna come. You know what the problem was? Parking. Where are we gonna put these people to park? So a structure was put into play to say, okay, we're gonna have a parking lot. Okay, that was part of this big deal. And so I love the ideas that are here, that the youth brought up. The murals, I think it's great, but we don't have any walls to do it. So you're gonna have to put up walls to do murals, because you're sure as heck not gonna put it on anybody's siding. And most of those apartment buildings, they're not gonna want that as well. So we wanna have those kind of things. There are empty lots. I think this is great, to be able to say to the village the same thing that we've been hearing forever. We need to do this. And I think that when you get to the trustees, they're gonna say the same thing. We want this because everybody wants it. The problem we've always had is, how do we get there? We know that the momentum is here, and this report that you have says it. It says what everybody wants. For the youth have said it. The people who are in their 30s and 40s who have moved in, they want it. Heck, we want it. We'd love it. It's about how do we now navigate into that, and I think that's gonna be the hardest thing to really get to, because there are certain things that people have to be realistic about. Like I said, you know, when it came down to the lake, understand it's a private lake. It's not ours. We don't control that. As Orlando said, we don't control what businesses are going to come here. We hope to attract them, and hopefully they'll bring in that money and build. I would love to have rooftops. I was surprised personally that Cooper's Hawk, that's in Kildare, didn't put up a rooftop, because rooftops are the hottest things out there, for crying out loud, and nobody's doing it. So you just need to have a second floor, right? Street closures, I think that's great, except who just went through a bunch of things when it came down to concerts and street closings, and I'm an alumni from there. Evanston, Northwestern. All right? And it was Wilmette that jumped in on the bandwagon, okay? So it isn't just an easy sell. When you do one rock the block a year, okay. But then all those homeowners, when we put up Lifetime, it was always about how much noise was gonna be there from Lifetime. So those are things that we also have to understand where this could possibly give a lot of pushback. When it came down to shuttle network, we used to have Pace here a long time ago. I'm not sure why Pace stopped. You used to be able to take the bus from Cuba and Rand and take it to the metro station. What happened to that? And if that comes into play, which I love what you brought up, which is the shuttle network, that would be fantastic. But again, I don't know who controls it. It's definitely not the village any more than we can control what IDOT controls. So I'm just saying, I love what's here. I would like to see more of that within the plan about, okay, how can we help you to have these things actually happen, as opposed to just putting out dreams and potential fantasies out there. That great, because we've been talking about this, like I said, for many, many years. I've been here since '86, and that topic has been here since then. And you take a look at Port Clinton, which is Highland Park, and then you look at some of the other downtowns, even Barrington and what they've done. It's fabulous. And we know we don't have a train, got it. But these are the things that, for me, are the things that I need to have resonate with me on the plan, that I need to hear, because I will tell the trustees, all day long. It's a great thing. Let's go do it. How do we do it? I don't know. And that's what I don't want to, from my side, I don't want to be that hamster in the wheel that just keeps spinning. I want to be able to have some traction to be able to get there.
That's very, very, very fair. And thank you for the depth of points there. You know, in terms of figuring out the A+B and how that does come to fruition, we've seen it work in different ways, and we've certainly seen things stalemate, you know, if you don't put the process and pieces in order. We heard through the comments, too, very much so, let's really invest in our streetscape for that to be that element that then we can do al fresco dining because it's wider. Cars slow down. It makes it nicer. We can put string lights over here now. Heck, we can do a new creative crosswalk here that partners with the local business or high school students. So it's certainly a balance. And thank you for sharing all that. You know, one innovative idea with the lake, because that is hard. How do we think through what the improvements are that are coming through the OSLAD grant? You know, that's going to put more feet on the street and traffic flowing into the parks. Consistently, we've seen by making communities not car dependent, you are opening up those arteries. It's an analogy, not a good one, but the circulation of the community can flow. The places that were looked over now are easier to get to. So Ryan, with Epstein on our team, I've already given him a heads up. We got some hard work to figure out what the opportunity is here. And we really have, along the way, connected with the community of not wanting to sell aspirations. We've really made sure to understand that those educational pieces, there's checkpoints here. We spent a lot of time at the workshop talking about that because the right of way along the lake, you know, it's the lake and it's private residences. And meanwhile, you have people zipping up and down and walking and, you know, enjoying life. And so you want to figure out how you can enhance that safety.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, like I said, you have a fabulous start here, and that's what you were saying, Sarosh, that's what this is, right? It's information gathering. And it's great to see people jumping on this bandwagon. Hopefully, they'll jump on to also help have this happen. It's just a matter of getting to that point, whatever that is, knowing that one of our biggest obstacles is the fact that most people are traversing Rand Road and they don't come into town. And even the bypass takes you away from downtown. It doesn't take you into downtown. And so, but again, I think once word gets out that these things are there, then people will come. There's no doubt there. And I believe that we've taken those steps with all of the housing that has now come into downtown. There's a lot more than it was even 8 years ago. All right? So that's a good thing. So there is where what they ask for. Bring the people in, then we'll come. Okay, we got the people. They're starting to come in more and more, right? Now, you know, when it comes down to things like the parks, unfortunately, in Lake Zurich, we don't have a lot of open land left to where you can build additional parks. And I know I read that in this report that people wanted more parks, and that's what the grant's about. It's about improving the water area, if I'm not mistaken, over there by the park. So it's already earmarked for something specifically in the park to redo that whole area that's right there. So it's not like that money is going to go to anything else other than pretty much that. So we need to get more grants, maybe, and what can we do with those? And then get, you know, IDOT to say we need to do some of these other things. So there's a lot of lobbying that we have to do, and I think that's a big component as to what's possibly missing here, that we need to have the governmental side. And if it means that we establish a committee that is somebody that can go to Springfield, that can talk on our behalf, that says this. Because what I saw here in your numbers, that you had 89% of the residents. So then my question was, well, where did the other 11 come from? So I'm assuming, don't know, that it came from Hawthorne Woods, Long Grove, some other people that are around us. Got it. It wasn't all 100% Lake Zurich, right? So they want to enjoy these things. And when we have Rock the Block, that's where they come from. Mm-hmm. It's not just Lake Zurich residents, right? So Those are the kind of things that we need to get to that point, and those are the things that I would like to see in your plan for the next, that says, part of the plan has to be that we need to get more involved with, whether it's downstate, whether it's directly to Pritzker or with whomever, to kind of start to look at this, to make legs, look, everybody dumps on us. That's a fact. And I mean Hawthorne Woods, Killdeer, Deer Park, Long Grove, Barrington. They all say, hey, they want it, stick it in Lake Zurich. Well, you know what? If that's where it's going to be, then let us have that opportunity to make this be the Mecca that we want it to be.
I'd also like to maybe add a comment here. The comprehensive plan is going to be seen as a very broad-based guidance document that will then give us as staff, you as the plan commission, the trustees, and the community, the guidance to maybe remove some of the regulatory barriers that we have in place to achieve some of the goals that we're going to be setting in this document. We also see it as an affirmation, this information gathering process, an affirmation of what the village is already talking about and doing, but formalizing it into the plan so that we can do it better and enhance it. So I just wanted to make that comment, that take a big step back. We're not looking at details here. We're looking at a very broad-based brushstroke set of guidelines that this comprehensive plan is going to give us in terms of what the community wants and how we can then realistically and practically implement it.
And I concur, because for me, it's taking the shackles off of you to say, hey, let's go have a two-story that has an open roof, that can have music, can do these things. And that's where we need to go, which I think that is really good.
But we have to hear it first so that we can then implement it, and that's where we are today.
Had a comment?
Not to completely focus on Main Street, but some things that I thought of and this might be outside of purview of a comp plan, but just when establishing a target audience for who's gonna come in and build on Main Street, it's not, from a development perspective, I don't see it as a chain commercial type business, because you don't have the traffic volumes. We've had success with established businesses already that are relocating to downtown because they already have clientele and they already have a presence, right? Because it's more of a destination than it is a drive-by, oh, that looks nice, go in. So our success has been with the vault relocating, and that was a creative plan for a building that was existing, and it worked out, right? They had a clientele, they were busy, and they relocated to downtown. In the pavilion too, that was more of a Lake Zurich initiative, but that's been a huge success, having Scoreboard run that pavilion. I mean, that's our busiest place in the summertime.
Absolutely.
So it's just something when we're looking at this, and how we target it, because it's gonna be really hard to, grab somebody that doesn't know the local community to invest money in that Main Street. So it's even if you're going to somebody that's 2 towns over, already has a, restaurant, and saying, hey, do you wanna open up a second location type thing? Just being realistic about target audience as far as who would actually come into the village. It's typically, it's somebody that's established already.
The florist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And, it's interesting, I'm an elder millennial, but entrepreneurship was kind of taboo, back in the 80s. It's less so. It's very much less so now. And to foster that within the community, that's where you get the local businesses who want to be here because they grew up here, they want to come back here. I absolutely think communication and messaging is important. What is that message? How do we communicate Lake Zurich's special sauce, that X factor, in so few words? If people don't know it's here, from bypass and turning, is wayfinding signage or some aspect of that to direct people here. it's come up a lot how people refer to Main Street even, right? Is it Main Street? It's downtown. It's all of these things, but the universal language is they love it and they want to improve it. So the note of small businesses, not big box, I think hours of operation, again, these are guidelines that can be put into place to allow to channel activity that you want and not just have it be a free-for-all, is really important. And then, I'm sure the high school has it, but, young entrepreneurs clubs where you start to foster that and it pays dividends down the way. But yeah, the vault is a great case study. Love the mural, how you can continue to learn from that. And I should also note, as part of our focus groups early on with businesses, some of the businesses had explored opening rooftop restaurants. And there were structural components that came into play, which is also a piece to understand. Yeah.
Jake?
Yeah, I don't want to talk for the sake of just talking, but I did want to say, not to accuse anybody else of doing that, but I think there's always a pressure to, yeah. I just wanted to say the biking and the lakefront messaging really resonated to me. I live over across Rand Road near the Lifetime, and whenever I have an excuse to drive along the lakefront, even though the lakefront is largely private, that still feels like a publicly accessible place to me, and it's such a relaxing experience to drive along that drive to wind up in downtown. And then when I heard this messaging about the biking, just what came to mind was why couldn't we have a bike Lake Zurich event where we have a closure of Old Rand Road along the lakefront, and that, even though the lakefront is largely private and accessible to the public, that space where you get to look over it is that is the public space where you get to see it and get that, they've clinically proven that seeing water and being proximal to that has mental health benefits. So even to Antonio's point of not everybody shares the lake, it's still a resource that we can all enjoy, at least in some fractional aspect, being residents of Lake Zurich.
Well, and fortunately, the street and the sidewalks, they're not owned, they're not private. They are ours. So that is where that can be done. It's great.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we had stated earlier when we say celebrate the lake, it doesn't mean be on the lake, on the water to celebrate. You can celebrate the lake visually by proximity through venues such as the Breezewell Sunset Pavilion. I mean, that in effect is celebrating the lake too, because you are in proximity to it and it's become part of the environment in which you develop. So that was part of what we wanted to kind of portray as celebrating the lake.
Joe?
Go ahead.
When-
What do you want to say, Joe?
The lake itself is not private, it's just the shoreline.
Yeah, accessibility.
So we can go on the lake.
When we say the lake is private, it's access to the lake is private. You can't
Right.
just walk onto somebody's property and launch a boat. You have to get to a place where you can launch a boat, a non-powered boat in this case, from Paulus Park.
We don't have a public boat launch.
We don't have a
Yeah.
public boat launch.
Is there a large swan paddle launch? No, I bring that up because at our very first event, pop-up at the farmer's market, that was one of the Post-its that got a ton of stickers. It was can we figure out how to do, it wouldn't be every day of the year. It'd be maybe 3 days or a weekend where you could have, if it's not motorboats or maybe it's paddle boats, but something where you could connect to the shoreline destinations. It's an experience. It could be part of, a restaurant, any sort of thing that you tack onto. That did come up. Winter Cities is another initiative that's really leveling up. I know that the Polar Plunge just happened. Did anyone participate? No?
It's coming
I-
up.
Coming up.
up.
Oh, it's coming up
Yeah,
still.
not done yet.
We have opportunity. Dang. I hear that's really good for your health, too.
Oh, yeah. On a day like today.
But Winter Cities, Francie just got back from a trip to Minnesota where they really lean into winter. Winter is fun. It's not something to shut her in for. Talk about mental health and ways to level that up. There's a lot of opportunity to do it. Some of the creative ways we can explore as part of this. Again, that's programming, but that then identity, that vibe that carries over to, oh, did you hear what Lake Zurich's doing? That becomes a community that you want to be a part of. Yeah.
Again, I think, so you brought up the launch, potentially. If I'm not mistaken, we tried to put a kayak launch not too far from the park. And the pushback that we got from a lot of the people who are residents of the lake was enormous. And that was just a kayak launch. So we have to be able to, through hopefully this, convince that grouping especially to say, hey, this is really good. Even if we had a launch, they're very, I tell you, I can't tell you how protective they are of their lake. They are. It is always tough when something comes before us, and they are involved. So that's where a little bit more of that massaging needs to take place as far as, are you guys on board with this? And if not, why not? And can you be? And, a lot of politicianing has to take place because it is tough. And unless we can get by those type of elements, which would be fabulous, and this was just kayaking, so.
As you say, it's a balance of competing interests.
Yeah.
That's how we look at it. Mhm.
Mike, we haven't heard from you.
So I'm born and raised in Lake Zurich. I'm a business owner in Lake Zurich. I moved my business into the downtown Main Street and working on buying a building down there. I've walked plenty of developers through downtown years ago, trying to get them to give some insight on developing the downtown area. A lot of the push, a lot of the feedback from them was tall buildings, rooftop, and it's gonna change the entire landscape of Main Street. So I think that's a challenge to try and get that whole downtown area with bars and restaurants, especially today. There's not too many restaurants opening up. But I mean, it all sounds great. I'm all for it. But Main Street has always been a challenge
Yeah.
from the time I was, very little to today. So, but the plan looks great. I'm all in. Exciting, but it's a challenge.
It is, and you brought up a really excellent point in terms of that question about rooftops, right? People want access to the lake. They want sight lines to the lake. Residents want privacy. They want to ensure that their property is their property. These are all things you can understand and respect. Within the Main Street setting, design guidelines are an opportunity. One, you want to make sure that that things are developed in a way where they don't dwarf. Buildings don't stand alone. They have neighbors, and you want to respect your neighbors. Design guidelines are a really excellent way to set that predictability. So if this infill site is available to develop and the neighbor on this side is 2 stories and the neighbor on this side is 1 story, I can only go up to 2 stories or say 3 stories. There's different ways to set, those components there where then maybe it can happen gradually and then you do get some of it without, having just any development come in and then it's too tall and it doesn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
In doing that's fine, but developers, it's all about the cash and the return, and 1-story, 2-story buildings isn't going to get them where they want to be. So it's the guys I talked to were, 5, 6-story condo buildings and commercial space in the bottom, and it would change the entire, landscape of it. But
Yeah.
anything's possible.
No, I hear you. The numbers have to work from their side. Definitely. Yeah.
Sean?
Yeah, sorry. I don't think the themes that arose were surprising. I think we heard that from everybody. And so for where we're at in the fact-finding mission, that makes a lot of sense to me. I guess going forward, I did comprehensive planning for a number of years coming out of school, and so I've gone through a number of these exercises, been on the other side of the table, so to speak. And in my view, what works well is a plan that's aspirational enough, but I think you've heard it a number of times, that's got to be moored in reality. And so I think there's a lot of takeaways from things that have worked well in the last 10 years since the last plan was made, things that haven't worked so well. You've heard some of the concerns that come up today, but whatever goals, objectives, strategies that come out of this, just having some direction on how they can be achieved. Maybe some of it is directly in the village's control, some of it's not. But having a clearer picture of how we get there, I think, to me, is gonna be the most critical part of this. Because there's a lot of ways we could get to the vision that I think is starting to come out of this, but if it's too pie in the sky, if it doesn't come out of, recommendations that truly align with where we're at right now, I think you heard it before, you've seen, I'm sure in your career, a number of plans that look great and then sit on a shelf and nothing happens with them, and if that's what comes out of this effort, it will be, it'll be a failure. So just for these recommendations really to have some depth behind them, that's kind of what I'll be looking for going forward.
Excellent point. Yeah. The capacity building has come up consistently. How do you build capacity with core groups who are doing so much? How do you establish those partners? The comp plan process, hopefully we're building some ambassadors along the way through this. And we can really lean into the grants and those action items to arrive at implementation. That's our goal. We love to see projects happen, and we do. And so that's the point where we're at. Yeah.
If I may also add, one of the things that we had charged the consultants to do was to look at certain focus areas, which they will bring back to us as part of the writing of the plan. And those focus areas will result in what we call implementable components of the plan, so that we don't have a plan that's just so, I would say, generic in form that it sits on a shelf. It's very contextual, and that is what we have charged the consultants to do, which is to come up with mini plans, so to speak, of these focus areas, so that we could have very specific implementable components that actually show result. So,
Thanks, Roche.
If I could ask a question,
Yeah.
Sarosh. I mean, so between the planners, the project planners, and your position, are they bouncing ideas off of you? Like, is there a sort of meeting of the minds about what's reasonable, or like historical context, like everything Antonio brought up? Like, all that's really important to realize kind of where we've been, because I think that historical context lends itself to the reasonability calculation. So getting the interface between you two parties before coming before,
Yes.
us, that seems like that machinery is in place. And
that is in
okay.
place. If you want to talk about our check-ins and things,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. So we check in every 2 weeks. Usually they're about an hour or so to gauge progress and next steps. So there's incremental transparency, action items in play, making sure we're on course. Our next, which I'm really excited about, our next internal workshop kind of charrette is to look at this, break out a map, get the geography of right-of-ways, get out the trace, understand what we're working with, and start to figure out how the pieces come together. So we'll be doing that with staff alongside Epstein and Todd with Egret and Ox, who is looking into the character elements, some of, how do we set precedents with the different personalities of places within Lake Zurich. So yes, I love to lean into local knowledge, and if you think of something following this meeting, it's not just this meeting. I will hand out information's on the website, and I am always available. So
And the feedback area is still open on the website, correct?
yes, we'll be keeping that open for the next month or two, so you can map that feedback. The map has been really helpful. People have been locating and dropping pins on specific places that they see potential for, as well as this is really cramped. I crashed into a bush here. All of that's really helpful. We're able to then take that GPS element, that GIS layer, and start to construct information and a story from it. And then there's the ideas wall. What's great about the ideas wall, people are upvoting the ideas they really support. So everything from housing to art to mobility and the importance of that. If anyone's listening.
And you
go, share.
all of you have seen the original request for proposals where we had outlined what the village wanted to see, and then the proposal that they submitted, which then guided us towards them to do the plan. So it started right at that point. And then we've had extensive, I should say, discussions with them, kind of unloading our local institutional knowledge onto them so that they get a better understanding to start off, to see where staff is coming from, and then, of course, using this process to see where the community wants to go. So, yes, we've been constantly at it, and that's been part of the format itself, that we're constantly bouncing questions or ideas off of each other, just to make sure that everyone's on the same plane and kind of like going down the same direction.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect, love to hear it.
So Rush, to that point then, in here, one of the elements that I read was that people are very thankful and want to see this continue the safety of our village. Okay. So within the conversations that you have prior to meeting with them, I'm assuming that you also get together with the police department, the fire department, to make sure that when we do some of these things, we have the full coverage that we need in order to protect what needs to be protected. Because part of this, if certain things expand, we'll probably have to expand the police force, maybe get another facility that's for fire, right? Because the one right downtown here by the railroad tracks, that one has been retired, correct?
Yes.
The one that was a volunteer one?
It's just,
So, it's those kind of things that we also have to know, that these are the things that we have to put in play to keep one of those elements that they say here. Because it is, they want to have a safe town. I read that several times.
Yes.
And so that's important. Thank you for answering that.
yeah, and it actually started with a conversation with our staff, including our public safety officials as well. So, and we will continue down that path, because the plan will be looked at by all facets of the services that the village provides, not just development.
Yeah, we kicked off in their new boardroom at the
Yeah.
police station. It was fantastic. Those tables are like transformers. Yeah, and safety too, in terms of that streetscape component. We have a saying, one of our urban designers at the office, you don't frost the cake until the cake is built or baked. Yeah, so you need that solid foundation before you start thinking about, all of the streetscape, you don't want to spend money on those pieces. You can do temporary pilot projects, right? That can bring the community together, and you can explore different, all right, let's bump out a corner here, it's safe, cross all that off. So, yeah, safety is important to maintain because it's here, and people very much value it.
Good. Okay, thank you, Aaron.
Thank you so much.
So what's, for next steps, is there a future land use type portion to the comp plan that we'll talk through?
Yes, land use is a major component of comprehensive plans. You have that land use base. We'll be circling back on that also in terms of when we're reviewing the focus areas with Zurich noted, and what areas remain based on the last plan and where we need to rethink what those definitions, uses, doing kind of an audit of that. Do you have any thoughts on the land use in particular?
Yeah, but we can save it for the next meeting.
Or maybe we'll follow up. I'd like to know, it's great to have the conversation going while, we're doing these internal sessions, so.
Well, and that's a great question. One of the things that I have been Soros, the plan that came before us that is that development, I think it was apartments, right to the south of Kitts.
Yes, the OSK houses on Old Rand and Bushing.
They were
The
telling
townhouses.
Townhomes. Okay, so that's not dead, right?
They were denied by the village board, but there is still conversation.
So within that conversation that's, let's hope, comes forward again.
Yeah.
Does our plan get communicated to them so that they know how to bring that to us again? And then, with combination of sidewalks and things like that. So is this, or even though we haven't gone in this direction for the plan, is it something that gets relayed to them so that they understand that as well?
Yes, like I said, that what we've heard from the community is an affirmation of what we are currently already talking about and doing. So yes, we are talking about these broader-based principles of planning, but also telling them what the community wants through the direction that was given to them when they went before the village board last January as well. So they're getting all of that information with the objective that when they come back to us, number one, they will be different from what they first provided because that got denied. And they will also address all of the various points that not just the community through the village board and the staff did that, but also what will work with that particular site. So they'll be looking at it from a high level down to the very grassroots of that property itself. So we're hoping we see that.
And the reason I say that is that in this plan, what people said, they wanted more green space, they wanted more playgrounds. Now, that would mean that possibly, I'm not saying it would, one of their buildings might have to be allotted for more of that space
Yeah.
to be able to have another park. Because if we start counting the parks that we have in Lake Zurich, we don't have that many. I mean, there's one in Braemar, there's one over by us in Chasewood. I mean, we have a number, we have
Over 30 parks.
just on corners, how
Yeah.
many?
We have 32 parks. in
And they're
town
saying they want
official.
more.
Right, but there is a difference. What we have is 32 publicly owned parks, which is open to the general public. At a smaller scale, we also look at open spaces within developments, like private tot lots, open space for the residents to use, as opposed to a general public park, which typically has to be a little larger than what this development would provide. So they're going to be providing for open space in the form of a recreational area that the residents can use. But at the same time, also preserve some of the natural open space to the north where the creek runs and the wetlands are. So that combination is what we will see as the open space, rather than seeing just everything just built out solid. So that's gonna be the difference, yes?
I've seen it before as like a density calculation
Yeah.
to the amenity portion. So you, once you start into a higher density, then you need to have amenities attached to it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, and that would provide that,
Yeah.
how they, feature that or how they establish an amenity, like that's up to them, whether it's a park or some other type of,
Right, so I get that we have 32 parks.
Yeah.
I got that part. But then when we start talking to residents, and when it comes down to things like pickleball, and it comes down to soccer, and it comes down to baseball, and we say, okay, how many parks of those 32 are now configured for that? It's not 32, okay?
Not every
Now
park
it's
is.
gonna be probably about 7, if that, all right? And so you have Braemar, you got Ela, you got where there's tennis courts and pickleball being what it's becoming, So I'm just saying, when we look at those things, maybe that's the question that was missing here. When you say you want more parks, what do you want to do with the park? Is it just to take a child, push them on a swing, and maybe have a teeter-totter and that's it? Okay, now you have a postage stamp park, got it. So we've got 32, but then they become more with sports coming into play.
And that's why we take this information that we've gathered from the community and kind of like fashion them into the goals and objectives, I think, that we're looking at the next stage too.
Yeah,
And that's coming up.
the park element came through on a number of different fronts. Enhancing the greenery in and around Main Street to the ability that could come now or could come with additional streetscape. The ability for shade trees to create that canopy. Creative interactive play areas was one of the, like hammocks or something that might be temporary for a season and create some energy. As an action step following, we're also looking at the zoning, just to see if there's opportunity do we recommend amendments to some of that so that there's more teeth to say, hey, this needs to provide 10% open space with connectivity to the balance of that within development review. This is policy, but the action items of the comprehensive plan then say, here's next steps where we can, get those other documents and codes up to speed to even further this vision.
Yeah, that's why I was just saying about what Mike brought up. It has to be realistic from the parks, because if we really look at it, Lions Park is a fabulous park, but it's private. It's theirs. Nobody can just walk onto that baseball field and start playing ball. And Ela is the same thing. All the things that are in the back, the tennis courts, that's pretty much public, but the other thing. So that's all I was saying, is that we want to make sure that we have a handle on that so that we don't get surprised later. For me, it's better to be more transparent, grab everything, see what we have, as opposed to not being able to do something just all of a sudden. Because we didn't have true definition or expectation of what was being asked when somebody says, I would like to have more green space and I'd like to have another playground. What does that mean?
Yeah, those are
Is-
fuzzy words. You want, right.
Exactly. When you have the more, it's like, okay, what does that mean? I don't know. Tell me what it means so I get a good understanding. So that's what we're gonna go for, right?
Yeah.
I'm just throwing it out there.
We don't like fuzzy words either.
But see, I think you showed your elder millennial when you said teeter-totters. They haven't had those for years now.
There's musical ones now, though, that they make music when you go up and down. It's true.
Can you, or that thing that went around?
I'm sorry.
Well,
Go
no,
ahead.
thank you all. This was very additive, the discussion. We know that the next steps are really big and really important. So we look forward to bringing back some traction based on what we presented tonight.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. And, you know, in the audience
you.
tonight, we have someone from the village that's very informative on special events
And
that happen
parks.
in the village, so he can shed all kinds of information to you about that. Right, Mr. Weiner? You happy to do that? Good, thank you. All right, thank you, Aaron. Okay, well, we have no public hearing tonight. Do we have any staff report this evening?
We don't have any current applications scheduled for your March meeting at this time, but if we do have any last-minute entries, I'll let you know. So as of now, we don't have a meeting scheduled for March.
Okay,
I will send out a cancellation notice in about a week, but for April, we have a couple of applications being lined up in the pipeline. One of them is the dispensary that went before the village board for its courtesy review. They are likely to have an application in for the April meeting.
okay,
That's all I've got.
all right. The next item on our agenda is public comment. Does the public have a comment to make? Okay. All right, then, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this evening.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Call the roll, please, Sarosh.
Commissioner Castillo? Commissioner Muir?
Aye.
Commissioner Giannini?
Aye.
Commissioner Glowaz? Commissioner Marks?
Aye.
Chairman Stratman?
Aye. We are adjourned this evening, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much and have a good night.
All right.